Hello, my name is M. Jason Graham, and this is writing. All week we've been talking about the basics of our story blueprint. Today we're going to talk about character action in specific. So there are two types of action in a story. There is character action and story action. Today we're going to break down story action into its component parts. Now, if you will recall, the definition of story action is one character's response to an event that impacts his or her life. So it doesn't matter when that event occurred, and I'm specifically talking to shifts now. So if you think about your pivotal character template or your pivotal character worksheet, and you look at the shift sections of the characters, during the course of the story, the characters should be going back and reliving those shifts, and there should be a challenge there. So this is the reason why character action is a response to an event that impacted the character's life. So we've got two processes as far as character action is concerned, and I took some time in order to really outline these because people ask me, what is the best way to prevent me from making the character do what I want to do? Those persons who finally discover that. Because as writers, we have a tendency, we think of it that we're God and we have this message. And so the character has to do this, this, and this in order to get the message out to the audience so that they can see it. And while that is the case, chances are the first 14 times that you do it is not actually going to reach most of your audience. And that's because you as a writer have a specific lens. That's the reason why you're writing. And that's the reason also why it's necessary, even when you have a novel, that you have an editor look at it, somebody who has a different lens. Because you want to make sure that you are getting to at least 80% of the people. Remember what I said last month? I said people saying that they don't like something is fine. People saying that they don't understand something, that's different. That has to be fixed. So here's a way of planning your character action out so that when you come to actually writing the story, and you will run into situations where it just doesn't work. Chances are you'll run into it here during this process. And we have a credible character worksheet as well that we're going to go over in the next couple of weeks. But the whole idea is that you're going to work out the actions or the beats that your characters are taking, not the story beats, not yet. But you need to work out the character beats for all of your characters in the course of the story, knowing what their ambition is, all of that. So we're going to, of course, start with planning. So planning is the thing that we may or may not see in the course of the story. The idea is that the audience has to be able to recognize and understand that the character has already planned things. He or she is going a specific direction, and we can see that in looking at the character. Now, here's the rub with it. And you don't like it, you're not gonna like it. I didn't like it when I first started. But it's something you have to get over. You are the vision carrier for your message, your story. But it's not up to you to implement all of the different parts of that. It's not up to you to be the director. It's not up to you to be the costume designer. It's not up to you to do the marketing. None of that stuff is up to you. Remember, I said that the main reason why you want to have a story that's clearly detailed, and the main reason why the guiding principles are so important, is that when you engage strategic partners whose gift or talent is in that particular area, directing, acting, making posters, singing the jingle, whatever that is, they have a clear understanding of what your story is about and the message that you were trying to convey. But it's not your responsibility to do all that stuff. You will drive yourself crazy. You cannot do it. I am telling you, I am a department head for Upiri, And I can't write any more stories because if I focus on the trees, I can't look at the overall woods. I can't plan. And so that's the reason why for this. And of course, you're going to try to do everything until you kill yourself. And then you realize, oh, okay, I need help. So, all of that being said, you have an actor or an animator that are going to communicate this planning process here. They're going to communicate it probably as quickly as possible because all of that happens in the eyes of the characters. It happens up here in their head. They may work something out on a piece of paper, but all of that is happening up here. So you see the soul of the character. That's why this part here is so important. So you have planning. And planning is internal, as I said. So planning, which is thinking about and organizing activities required to achieve the desired ambition. Remember that the character ambition is whatever they're pursuing in the course of the story. So that's going to be different for your protagonist and your antagonist, and it's also going to be different for each of your foils. And you need to know all of that information. I cannot stress that enough. You're going to run into problems later on because you're not going to know how a character feels about something in particular because you don't know what their ambition, what they're trying to get, why they're working with the other characters, why they're fighting against the other characters. You have to know this first. So we have planning. And then the next part is implementation. Now, implementation, both of those are action words, but implementation is the part that we see. Chances are we see most of it, right? But it's an external thing. So we see it, and then both are necessary to maintain emotional continuity and must be seen by the audience. So there needs to be some part of planning that they see with the character, and there needs to be an implementation that they see, the audience sees, in order to maintain emotional continuity. If you jump cut to a new scene and nobody knows what happened from before, people are going to get confused. So you have to work that out. Do they need to see every bit of it? No. If it takes 15 minutes to disarm a nuclear bomb, we don't need to see all 15 minutes. Chances are we're going to cut back and forth and see maybe 5 seconds at a time at major intervals. That's still implementation. So, required activity. So thinking about and organizing. Planning is thinking about and organizing activities required to achieve the desired ambition. Implementation is putting a plan into effect. So actually doing it. So let's break down planning. Planning, so the first part of planning is ambition, which is to say, identifying a tangible, quantifiable objective. We got to know what the character wants. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be absolutely clear what the character wants. We can know that he wants something, but you as the writer have to know what he or she wants, because you have to then take those 5-second moments in order to drop the important 5 seconds that give the audience members the ... but of course, when you do the big reveal. Next is design. So you create the best path to achievement. So you have your objective, now you're working out, you're designing the best way to go about it. Again, you may not see all of it. It's a moment-to-moment thing, but it has to be there. Next, and finally, faith. Faith, confidence. I like faith because I tend to tell more supernatural stories. Faith is the character's confidence that they've done everything that they can in these first 2 steps and that they're ready to go into implementation. If the character is not sure, or if you have the character that's not sure, then the character will fail. The only thing that makes sense is for them to fail. Having your character succeed by luck is going to say something else. It is a cheat. It cheats the audience because it means that the character doesn't actually have to invest in his or herself. And that's not the message that we want to send to our audience. The faith in oneself and the faith in the plan must be there. And before we move on to implementation, the steps in implementation are positioning. So the character is moving himself, his or herself, into the best position in which to, the next thing, execute the plan. So in the best position that gives them the best confidence, the best allows the plan to succeed. Next is execution. That's the character following the plan. So you should know what the character is doing from moment to moment. If you do not, you're going to add things that don't need to be added, and it's not going to make sense as you move along further in the story. You have to know what the plan is and how he's executing it. All of these things reveal character, which is the other thing. This is how you reveal planning as far as how your character thinks, is in this part right here because you're showing it. Lastly, we have the review. So the character observes the effect of the plan. So they do the plan, and the thing goes off, and the thing doesn't go off. Whatever it is, it happens or it doesn't, or there's varying degrees. That's the review. All three of these things are part of implementation. So planning and implementation. So then the next question, of course, is why is character action so important? We've talked about this a little bit. As far as emotional continuity is concerned, your character has to make sense in what they're doing. Every action in a story should be motivated in response to the action of another character. So, although it's not necessary that the motive or the character be revealed at the start of the story, you as the writer should have this information worked out as part of the outline of the plot. So, for instance, you may, and this is something when we get into story blueprint next week. Next week we get into story units. But typically in movies and film or on television, when you have an hour-long drama, there's an issue that is revealed at the start. Something that needs to be fixed. And it's generally not until halfway through that the protagonist meets the antagonist in the story in order to know who it is that's directing traffic, if you will. That's a term I get from good old Jim Ross in WWE. So it's not necessary that you know who did it, or that you reveal, I should say, who did it to your audience in the opening moments. It is necessary that you know who did it. Again, more with the stressing. If you don't know who did it, you don't know why they did it. Everything's going to be all over the place. You have to work on your antagonist and your antagonist foils more than you work on your protagonist, because your protagonist is in your head. So you need to do all of these steps so that you know how they'll respond. Key thing is, and I found it, that once you do all of this work, if there is something in the outline of the story, in the story blueprint, that doesn't work, or a scene that you have to cut or change locations, or whatever it is, you have to change the scene, you know so much about the characters that you know what they would say in this instance. I can't tell you how freeing that is. Anyway, the final step, you can't really see it, is assessment. So assessment is different from review, in that during a review, you're actually in the same scene looking at what you've done. An assessment occurs in the next scene or the next part of the story with the character, where they actually go over in detail what occurred in that previous interaction. That's assessment. So, to go over it again, character action consists of two processes: planning, which is ambition, design, and faith; implementation, which is positioning, execution, and review; and then assessment, which happens in the scene after the character action, the implementation. And the reason why character action is so important is because everything needs to be motivated by action of the characters within the story itself. So on next week, we are actually going to talk about story action, and then we'll get into story units, as it were, and a breakdown for you. Of course, if you have any questions, please hit me up at mjgstorycreation@gmail.com or go to my website. This writing is brought to you by mjgstorycreation.com. Go to mjgstorycreation.com and turn your idea into an epic story today. I'll see you next time.